All right, so one failed live attempt to go live, and that was interesting. I'm using the new phone, and I don't think it has any issue necessarily. I like the new iPhone 8 Plus. It's like the biggest phone that I've got, so that's a little uncomfortable, but overall, I like it. Okay, so I was telling you a little bit of my life story and how I kind of got to producing music production and kind of teaching other people how to make music. And I was kind of telling the story of I started like making loudspeakers for, you know, like home theater, not home theater, but home professional high-end speakers. I'm talking the kind where you need like 4 separate amplifiers to make this thing sound amazing. And basically the cabling itself cost, you know, a good $1,000 just in the cabling or whatever. Like, we're talking expensive stuff. So I learned a whole lot about loudspeakers, and just to move through the story quicker, my car crapped out. I could no longer use my car. I wasn't making enough money to really fix the car. So I lost that job, and I ended up having to work at a pizza place right by my house. I had to find some place where I could walk to. So I did that for a bit over a year, maybe a year and a half at most. And I was the guy that made the dough in the back. You know, I'd get up early in the morning and rush over there and make dough till like 3 in the afternoon. It actually wasn't a terrible gig, because, you know, when I'm back there making dough and everything, I get to listen to my music and kind of think about music and all that sort of stuff. So for that, it was pretty good. And the guys I worked for, I liked them quite a bit. But my best friend's mom gave me her car, so I was back in business as far as being able to drive places. And someone had offered me a job at Guitar Center at the time. This was about 1997. And I was thinking, great, you know, I'm going to be around a lot of musicians. This is really going to help with inspiring me musically and that sort of stuff. So I took that job, and I was working there. I was only making $1,000 a month, and plus commission, but I almost never made commission. I mean, I'm not saying it was impossible to do, but it's much easier when you're working in like other departments, like PA sound systems or guitars and amps. Because basically, when you're working in guitars and amps, you basically give someone any guitar that they want, and you give someone any amp they want. You give them a guitar cable, some strings, picks, and they're off, right? They know exactly what to do with it. It's always going to work. But at this time, we were in a transitional stage in keyboards and software. So the problem was that all this technology wasn't necessarily working well together. You know, some people were using ADATs, and some people were using reel-to-reel, and some people were just using specifically their computer, but they still had all kind of hardware that they were trying to get all synced up through MIDI and program changes and all this different stuff that was like incredibly convoluted. And computers were not all that powerful, but they were starting to get powerful enough to record. So that's the department I was in, you know. So people would buy a synth, and then they'd buy a MIDI thing, and then they'd buy some sort of thing with SMPTE to like basically sync all their stuff up with their ADATs or with their reel-to-reel. And it was like, a lot of this stuff was new technology, so a lot of it really didn't work very well. So I constantly had people like coming back wanting to return their shit because they couldn't get it working, or sometimes it just plain didn't work. So I got really good. I was already pretty good with keyboards and synthesizers and understanding how those worked, and starting to understand how samplers worked and things like that. So I was really good at kind of teaching people how to make things work together. And at the time, software was just coming out. So you had like the first version of SoundForge, you had the first versions of Cubase and Cakewalk. Acid came, I think, maybe the next year, or maybe it was already around. Fruity Loops, I don't know that I sold much in Fruity Loops. I don't know if we had that yet, but that came later as well. So what was cool was these software companies would give you the software for free. And most people in my department, like, they got the free stuff, but they didn't really learn it at all. So I was one of the few people that actually learned how to use the software. And, you know, I was the guy where, while everyone else was making sales and making money, they would send people to me. So I was spending all my time saving other people's sales. So on paper, my own sales looked really, really shitty. So not only was I working 6 days a week, at least probably about 50 to 60 hours, you never had weekends off. You always had to work from morning till night. So usually that was on Saturday, I think it was 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. And then on Sunday, I think we closed at around 6 or 7, but it was 9 a.m. to 6 or 7. So basically I had no life at all working there. It was, it really wasn't good for my creativity. And you're just hearing from the guitar department, you know, everyone's wanking on their guitars and playing way too loud, and they're all playing the same damn riff. And in the keyboard department, you know, there's tons of wannabe producers that are like trying to basically spend all day in Guitar Center producing their sound and stuff like that. So they were just using those keyboards to like make songs or whatever. Some people were pretty good, but still, it's just so much noise and stuff going on. And I was working so many hours, so much that I was sleeping through my lunch breaks. Sometimes I would oversleep and come back in like a half hour later than I was supposed to when I returned. So yeah, I was just exhausted. And then of course you barely have any time for any holidays. I mean, you don't get holidays off for the most part. You get like Thanksgiving off, but the very next day you got to be there at like 6 a.m., you know, prepared for Black Friday. And it was just a nightmare. So basically I was getting more and more unhappy. I was only making $1,000 a month. I wasn't hitting any goals, so I wasn't making any bonuses or whatever. And at that time, you basically were making commission. It was commission based. So it was just sell, sell, sell. So I was basically miserable. It was probably around 1998. And I started thinking, I got to get out of here, but I have no idea what I'm going to do. But the one thing I had going for me was that I was the guy people would come to when things went wrong, you know. And I was starting to make some home visits to people's studios and kind of collecting a bunch of clientele outside of Guitar Center that I would like come to their studio and help them set things up. And you know, that went fairly well. A lot of the stuff I was doing kind of for free or getting paid very little. I don't know why I was doing that at the time. I think I was just afraid to ask for money. And I was just trying to build relationships for Guitar Center. But I decided the beginning of 1999 that I was going to quit Guitar Center. And I had all this software that I knew how to work with. So I kind of had to make a choice, you know, right at this. It was a real transitional period for me. It was like, am I going to work for $1,000 a month and be absolutely miserable? Or am I going to risk going completely broke? But it's not a guarantee I'm going to be miserable. Like, it might be better, right? And I decided to take that risk of like, well, I'd rather have a chance of my life getting better. So that's when I started training people. It was like 1999. And I would drive out to people's houses. You know, at the time you didn't have the ability to interact on the internet or anything like that. So I spent a lot of years like just sitting one by one with people on all different programs. You know, they bring me in for Pro Tools, or they bring me in for Acid or Cubase or Cakewalk, or, you know, didn't matter what the program was. I kind of got to a point where I could learn it all. Reason. I did do Fruity Loops later on because I was using Fruity Loops later on as well. So I was doing all of that type of stuff, and I was driving out to, you know, I lived in Riverside at the time, Riverside, California. I was driving out to Palm Springs and LA and San Diego, and I was just going everywhere, you know, and not really making that much money, but, you know, I was kind of desperate for, you know, just to work, you know, just to try to keep my head above water. So the second thing that I started doing while I was training people was I had all this noise reduction and kind of mastering software. So I started doing, well, the first thing I started doing was helping people clean up their vinyl. They wanted to take their vinyl and bring it into the digital domain, you know, and kind of archive all their vinyl. So I would help them clean up their vinyl for a charge. So I was charging people to do that. And eventually that kind of got into doing mastering for bands and stuff like that. I had learned a lot about mastering, and I was using, you know, at the time, you know, the software was kind of cutting edge. So I wasn't charging that much money because I wasn't like a pro yet, but over the years I got better and better at mastering, and, you know, I started bringing in more clientele. And that lasted for probably a good 10 years that I was doing mastering, while at the same time I'd go over and I started having regular people that I would visit them, you know, at least once a week, sometimes twice a week on different programs. So I got really good at teaching people what they needed to be taught within a 3-hour period, you know, because a lot of times I was just doing like one training with them. But some people, I started doing regular training, and I do like 2-hour sessions with them, once a week or whatever. So that's kind of how I got into using technology and training people. And, I was really wearing myself out, not making a ton of money, because I had like, a number of people around me, and I just was having to drive here, there, and everywhere. And, then I'd go for a while without any business, that's just how it goes. So while I was training, I started getting jobs producing albums, and I produced some semi-popular industrial bands, and I helped produce like a new age group. And so I started like producing bands and bringing people into my house and recording them and mixing them, and getting credits on their album and stuff like that. A lot of them were just kind of local artists, but some of them kind of went off to bigger and better things. So it was kind of nice to have my name on those. And it was around that time that someone had suggested to me, because computers were getting more advanced, and a friend of mine said, hey, you should really think about just putting a collection of videos on DVD and sell those through eBay or whatever. Why don't you start teaching people? That way you can sell things outside of your local area and make a little bit of money. And I thought, that's a good idea. And I was so poor, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll make an extra $50, sending out these DVDs to a couple people a month. At the time, I made some videos, and they were kind of crappy. The technology wasn't good, and I didn't understand the technology all that well. But the information was really solid, because I had a lot of experience teaching people. And it was at this time, I had progressed into mainly teaching people Ableton, right? So I made like an Ableton course, and I sold it on eBay for $20. I think it was about like 2 or 3 hours of videos. And little by little, I started getting people from all over the world ordering my DVD. And it was just like a burnt DVD that I would write on. It was nothing special. But I started making more money, obviously, than $50 a month. And, I kept selling them. So I'd have to constantly buy like bubble wrap, packaging for the DVDs. And I was sending them all over the world. And that was cool. It was a good start. But I realized that, burning and sending DVDs was kind of a pain in the ass. So I had someone help me build a crappy website, and I started selling this course on my website. And eventually I started like trading people training to get my website upgraded and updated, because at the time I still didn't have much money coming in. And eventually it got to the point where I was able to kind of support myself a little bit better, and I started making more training courses, and they started selling, and I started working with other people that were good with Ableton, and we do stuff together, and we do promotions together and stuff like that. And just over the years, that probably brought me up to about 2006 or something like that. From there, I started basically writing blogs and really just sharing as much knowledge as I could. I started a YouTube channel, sharing a lot of free stuff there. So I was sharing a lot of free stuff, and on top of that, I was selling some courses. And then everything just kind of built kind of naturally. I started a membership training. I wanted to do it for a while, but I was like afraid that the technology wouldn't work real well. With everything, you just have to kind of fall forward. But that's kind of how I got to where I'm at, just slowly. As I started off selling stuff on eBay, and eventually I had my own website and my own products, and they got better and better and better, and I got more and more clients, and I kind of built up to what I'm doing now. So, now I've got like, I've got about 20 years of experience like with music software, and I've got, probably 7 or 8 more years on working with bands and working in my own band, playing guitar, understanding that dynamic, understanding sequencers and samplers and all that different type of stuff. So I kind of accumulated all of that knowledge and all of the knowledge of training people one-on-one and training people through the internet, and eventually doing like Skype trainings and stuff like that as well. So my life got a little bit easier, and at the same time I was making more money. Still not making a ton, but finally able to start kind of supporting myself. So it was a really long process of getting to where I'm at, but that's now why I'm so confident in my ability to train people. And because I've seen it all, I've gone through it all, I know all the problems that people have, and I learned really quickly the most important things to help people to get from this point to this point, right? To really start finishing songs and understanding the technology. And I also got really into kind of the mindset that was necessary to start finishing more songs and increasing focus, you know? So all that stuff kind of came together, you know, and at the same time I was, you know, teaching people, you know, DJing techniques, because I was DJing through some of this as well. And, you know, that's kind of another story. And actually DJing kind of helped sustain my income while the training was kind of only bringing in sporadic sort of financial assistance, right? But that's kind of been my journey. Somewhere in there, I had to pick up a job and work at Best Buy for about 1.5 years. And that was another nightmare. I didn't really enjoy that. But once again, I enjoyed some of the people I worked with. But once I quit that job, I was done working a proper job. And I've basically maintained my ability to be an artist and a trainer, you know, for the last at least 10 years. I think more than 10 years now. So that's my story. That's kind of how I got here, you know, that one pivotal moment where I had to decide to quit my job and my security and kind of move after something that that I thought would fulfill me a lot more, right? That was really the thing. And I really enjoyed the idea that I'd go over to someone's house, train them, and I was able to transform their experience of making music. And, you know, just getting that feedback over and over again, I realized I must be pretty good at this, you know. And that was a good 10 years ago that I started feeling like I was pretty good at this. You know, now I don't train on all the other programs. I just train on Ableton. But that's how I got to where I am now. That's like my big kind of life story. I've got so many other stories in between, but I just wanted to give you guys an overview of like how I got to this point where I'm teaching people. It's not like I just woke up last year and decided, hey, this seems like a good way to make money. I'm just gonna like tell people I know how to train and that sort of stuff. It wasn't like that at all. You know, my experience with software started in around 1998, and my experience with hardware goes all the way back to 1988. So that's kind of who I am. That's how I've kind of adapted to where I am. And I know that this story might be kind of boring for you because it's like, well, where am I getting the value from this? And I definitely like to share value with you guys, but I just thought it was important that you understood a little bit more about me. And, you know, I came from very, very humble beginnings, you know, of just having absolutely nothing to work with. You know, I was very lucky at a pivotal time where I was really in a bad place. And my best friend's mother gave me her car. And that transformed my ability to do all the things and kind of the domino effect that led me up the ladder and finally got me out of poverty, you know. So for those of you who are struggling as music producers and musicians, I completely understand that because I have totally been there. You know, no one handed me, you know, the keys to success at all. You know, I failed and fell on my face many, many times before I got to this place where I can consider myself a bit more comfortable. So yeah, so that's my story. That's kind of how I got to this place where, you know, now I'm launching master courses. And if you guys are not yet familiar with me, my name is Jason Timothy. I run music software training. Take care, guys.